Per spiegare, cominciamo qui con la storia di questo edificio, al 209 East Strada 7, qui siamo nell'East Village di New York. Questo è un edificio autonomo, ricostruito dagli inquilini, dalle persone che vivono qui. È stato ricostruito prima per 5 anni, dall'85 al 90, e poi dopo un incendio molto grave, un incendio che ha quasi distrutto metà del palazzo. Lo abbiamo ricostruito una seconda volta ed adesso sono 12 anni di lavori con molto uso di materiale riciclato, con molto uso di creatività individuale. Ogni spazio è diverso dall'altro, come vedrete in questo documentario. Di proprietà, questo palazzo ancora non è dal punto di vista legale nostro, comunque è un ottimo esempio che se si resiste in questo modo si può mostrare ai governi, o se esisterà in un futuro una politica di sbocco per questi tipi di attività autonomi, cominciando con l'autonomia, ma eventualmente questo è un servizio sociale per le case, che a questo punto in una cittadella come Manhattan, qui dove siamo, è quasi ormai un'impossibilità, che è riservata soltanto ai più ricchi. Noi ci sentiamo un po' isolati in questo momento, siamo come un'isola, appunto come Cuba, con tutti i pesci cani che ci girano intorno. E spero che vi troverete queste riprese molto anzi sono sicuro che troverete queste riprese molto interessanti.
Qual è la politica del governo locale alla comunità squatter community?
Attualmente la politica locale è totalmente contro queste attività, anzi non solo è contro, ma sta cominciando uno sviluppo per case di lusso, chiamiamole così, molto attivo adesso. Tutto intorno a noi si sta costruendo e gli inquilini sono sgomberati, e la minima cosa che non funziona con noi, per esempio, troverebbero la minima scusa per entrare e sgomberarci. Quindi è una politica molto difficile. Aggressiva contro di noi adesso, totalmente aggressiva.
Allora, perché non parla della situazione in East 13?
Ecco, giusto. 2 anni fa abbiamo testimoniato un esempio di questa aggressività, cioè erano palazzi, in quel caso erano 5, quindi ben 5 edifici alla 13th Street, la 13ª, qui vicino, tra la A e la B, sempre nell'East Village. Anche in quel caso si era lavorato molto per più di 10 anni, c'era stato anche un giudizio favorevole nel Tribunale Supremo, nella Corte dello Stato di New York, e nonostante questo Giuliani ha mostrato la sua aggressività, che ha appena trovato un minimo sbocco legale per sgomberare, ha fatto proprio una specie di invasione, operazione militare con oltre 2000 poliziotti, mitragliatrici, elicotteri, un carro armato addirittura, per sgomberare persone poi relativamente indifese. Tutto è successo relativamente in brevi periodi, da una alla sera alla metà del giorno dopo erano già tutti sgomberati. Le riprese sono impressionanti, che vedrete, come dico nel documentario, perché anche persone che non avevano niente a che fare con la situazione, erano solo spettatori, come per dire, hanno subito botte gravi dalla polizia, perché a quel punto come animali si sono lanciati contro di noi. Quindi a quel punto è tutto finito. 2 mesi dopo c'è stata una specie di controresistenza, cioè durante la festa di indipendenza qua, che il 4 luglio si celebra il giorno dell'indipendenza in America. Allora era una sera dove molta polizia da fare per vedere, guardare il lungo fiume, c'è molta gente, casino, confusione. Allora era ottima per riconquistare il palazzo. Abbiamo ripreso un edificio, ma solo per diverse ore. Ci hanno addirittura sorpreso che loro hanno rimobilitato le forze che stavano prima verso il fiume, le hanno riportate entroterra verso la 13ª, sono ritornati gli elicotteri, gli stessi elicotteri, i militari, le mitragliatrici, e poi alla fine ci hanno riscomberato una seconda volta. Comunque sì, sta costato, ecco, questo i cittadini di New York dovrebbero capire meglio che questo tipo di politica aggressiva contro di noi sta costando alla città, cioè ai cittadini che pagano le tasse, molti soldi, ecco, diversi milioni di dollari solo per sgomberare la 13ª strada. Adesso nel documentario mostrerà la forza di questa invasione in tutti i suoi dettagli.
women, children, babies.
more people are going to...
We don't believe in squatters, and you cannot renovate a building that meets codes by yourself.
We're all doing it because we want a better way of life. We're not being given it. We are doing it for ourselves. A squatter, I am a squatter, and damn proud of being a squatter.
When I was sleeping on the E, I did consider myself a homeless person, but now I'm a squatter.
This may look like an abandoned building ready to be torn down, but it's not. To about 20 people from all walks of life, this is home. Good evening. I'm Edward Asner. Tonight we're going to take a look at the private lives of squatters on the Lower East Side. For fear of eviction, we can't tell you where these people live, but we can show you how they live underground in Alphabet City.
Underground means that there are people that can't afford to live anywhere in the city, that are squatting, and they have to live underground to keep the city out in order for them to make it.
Even though we have some leaks in the roof, the electric is safer than a lot of landlord-owned buildings that I've seen.
I was homeless for 2 days in my life. That was in 1980, and luckily I have had enough, strength of mind and courage to say that's not for me.
Good stuff. As far as I know, all the respectable squats ain't nobody been killed in them. And I don't think the people in charge of the welfare hotels can make that claim. The only time people get killed in a squat is when the building is on fire.
I basically started living in the squats with my boyfriend when I was 16 because he didn't have any place to stay. So, I just felt like I wanted to be with him and give him moral support. So I started squatting with him.
One thing we've learned over the past few weeks is that there is no such thing as a typical squatter. By definition, a squatter is someone who settles on property without right, title, or payment of rent. In other words, it's someone who moves into an abandoned building such as this one and stakes out that space as his or her own. Now, the next question is, why would anyone want to risk their lives and burn out buildings like these? Number one, it keeps the rain out, for the most part anyway. Some feel it beats the shelters. It's better than paying exorbitant rents. And despite its frightening appearance, it's safer than the streets, especially for the kids who float in and out of Alphabet City. Kids who grow up hard and fast hanging out on the Lower East Side scene.
The scene is, I don't know, the Lower East Side. It's, well, I guess you could say it started out as punk rock or whatever the you want to call it.
What they're into is right down there. Everything they're into is in there. The dress, the hairstyles, the music, everything is right there.
There's all different types of people. There's mods, there's skinheads, there's peace punks, there's hardcore kids, there's gothics. There's all different types of scenes.
Take off your hat. Oh my God, he's a skinhead.
They live in places where there are no lights. There are abandoned apartments where they just throw mattresses down, and you might see a few of them in there.
The adult world looks down at it and says, well, what do they have there? And it's terrible, but it's a community, and they have friends there, and they support one another, they help one another, they fend together, they find food together, they share. There's a lot of sharing going on. And it's an attraction to these kids.
Being in the squat is much, much better than being stuck on the streets.
It's a courageous thing, perhaps, to live in the squat, but it's not anyone's first choice.
Being homeless is like the worst thing in the world. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Move along, stay close to the wall. Looking over your shoulder, just in time. Avoid the light, close your eyes, and put your hand in mine. And put your hand in mine.
I'm a panhandler myself, and every time I see a panhandler, if I get an extra dime or if I have an extra nickel, I'll throw it in his cup because I know he needs it, just like I do. I wouldn't be out there if I didn't, and they're not out there just for the fun of it. They're out there because they need it.
This place, it frightens me. This place, it frightens me.
God only knows where I'll be, you know, but one thing about the scene is that in a weird way it kind of has a very high success rate and a very high failure rate with people's futures, that is.
I live for today. I live for now. I try and survive at the moment, and I don't think of the future.
A lot of kids making the scene in Alphabet City are runaways. They leave home looking for adventure, but soon the rules change and the stakes of the game are much higher. Before they know it, the street takes over and the runaways are running for their lives.
Running for our lives, at least we're pretending we are. Running for our lives.
Being naive and, you know, childish on the streets is going to get you dead. That's all it gets you, is just a real quick death. And it's not pretty, and it's not fun.
I just cannot see these kids as losers. I feel in the end that they lose, but not because they are losers when they come here. They come here with dreams and with plans, and they're trying to make it work.
What we're finding in the last couple of years, it's mainly middle-class children. It's not kids from poorer neighborhoods.
Why did I leave home? Because my home was boring.
I couldn't deal with, you know, the parent-child scene. My mom wanted me to pay rent after I was like 18 and living at home, so I was starting to squat 2 miles away from my mom in Massachusetts. And I figure, I've been in New York since '87. I should have my own squat.
Yes, welcome to this old squat.
Nice, ain't it?
I'm not exactly keeping the neatest place in the world, but meets the shelter system. This is called cleaning up this old squat. What do you hear? Okay.
We have to all be responsible if we don't want to turn these kids into losers, and if we don't want them to die in the streets.
When we come back, how the city reacts to squatters who are renovating abandoned buildings on their own.
They're stealing from the public. That's all they're doing, and if we can stop them, we will.
Underground in Alphabet City will continue. Squatting is one way to beat sleeping on the streets, but there are professional squatters, or homesteaders as they call themselves, who are in it for the long haul. They move into abandoned buildings, clear out the rubble, and transform empty spaces into homes.
Hey, Ed, you gotta show me how to do that, though.
If it were not for homesteaded buildings or squatter buildings, artists would have no homes, they would have no place to stay.
It just seems ridiculous to be rent poor.
We are not squatters, we're homesteaders. We work, we do rubble removal, we put up, we hire electricians, we hire plumbers, we hire engineers to help us and teach us how to do the work properly so that it is up to the code of the city of New York.
You cannot renovate a building that meets codes by yourself. You have to be an electrician, you have to be a plumber. Cannot be done by yourself, and we don't believe in squatters.
The typical situation is just somebody existing, hardly living in these buildings, just using it for a roof over their heads, just a little warmth, but certainly not a fixed-up accommodation.
Washing machine. This is where the dishes are. This is our water heater.
Hot water heater.
Hot water heater. This kit holds all the hot water. This my father made. He sandpapered it.
As you do things, you take pride in it. You know, I'm not going to want to see somebody come up and spray paint my door. I'm going to be watching out for it because it's my door, and I put it up, and I'm taking the pride of every little screw that I put into it.
Note, they don't teach carpentry at Temple. The buildings are basically modern outlaws because we build a home and property that's owned by the city.
'Cause he's a refugee. He looks so sad, so lonely. He's coming from across the sea.
One of the best things that's come from this is seeing people who have become totally dependent on the shelter system or the welfare system or whatever, just get back their self-determination, get their own independence back into their hands.
His house was bombed down. His family laid to the ground. Now he's come here to live all alone.
I've been down here for over 20 years. I've raised my child down here. I see my neighborhood changing. I no longer know these stores anymore. I don't longer know these people anymore. I see stories about squatters. I see squatters everywhere. I don't know them. They weren't here when I was here. You know, I see people on the cardboard, and I know them. They were the same people that lived in those buildings. How come they're not there?
They tell me I can't stay here, I can't stay there. And I said, listen, you got to give these people a break. There's no exit. I said, if the people complain and don't want us on the street, they should give us back our apartments.
My opinion about them is that they're stealing. That's the way I see it. They're taking away. They're taking something that doesn't belong to them, and they have the nerve to stand up here and say the city's not letting them, you know, the city's not giving them any help, the city's not doing this for them, and all the time they've taken away from the poorer people that really need these apartments.
In this time of homelessness, why does the government own all these abandoned buildings? And when they seize new buildings under the war on drugs, they don't put people in to house them, they seal them up. And they're perfectly good buildings. They're not abandoned and deteriorated like this one is. So it really raises the question, what is the government doing about housing?
Well, we have a number of programs on the Lower East Side. One of the programs that we have put together with the community is a program to build 2,000 housing units, 1,000 market rate and 1,000 subsidized units over the next few years, so that every abandoned building in the Lower East Side that is structurally sound would be rebuilt and made available to people making in the low 20s or less.
The city's doing nothing to help the poor people. The city's helping, the city's only helping those who they think have potential for money. And as far as the poor people go, no. They don't want the poor people in the city. They want to move the poor people out of the city.
This is grossly criminal and inhumane. It's a conspiracy by the federal, state, and city government, the religious organizations, and all the rich people to simply get rid of poor people.
And the clothes that he's wearing, the people are staring. If you listen, you can hear them say, well, he's a refugee. He looks so sad, so lonely.
As a squatter, you own your squat. You own your space because you built the space. The space is yours. And maybe in a few days, the city will come in with bulldozers and SWAT teams and take the building, but we'll just have to take another building.
He lost his homeland, made his last stand. He's a man without a country.
You know, it's all conceptual. If they are owned by the city of New York, at this point, they're public property, you know, and so that they belong to everyone.
Although the homesteaders see themselves as the people of New York, Commissioner Abraham Bitterman of Housing Preservation and Development looks at it another way.
They're not the people of New York. They're some of the people of New York. We make sure that all the people of New York get a chance, an equal chance, by doing a lottery. They didn't have a lottery. They just grabbed it.
I don't believe in that lottery. I happen to know that those lotteries are not fair. Those lotteries are bought just like anything else.
So if you are a poor person and you're waiting for the government of the United States to provide housing for you, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. All you have to do is go into the building, take the building, fix the building up. If the building has been sitting there for 10 years, the building belongs to you. You take it, you form your own community, and you work on the building. You put the building together. Thanks.
New York City is in the midst of a serious housing crisis. There are an estimated 75,000 to 100,000 homeless people in this city alone. The problem, of course, is a lack of affordable housing. Under the Reagan administration, federal funding for new low-income housing was slashed by 76%. That's the difference between a $33 billion allotment and an $8 billion allotment. A representative from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development put it this way: we're getting out of the housing business, period. But not this city. According to Mayor Koch, New York has big plans.
We're going to rehabilitate every single building that the city of New York owns that's now abandoned. It will be done in over a 10-year period, but it's well on its way.
Recently in the South Bronx, the city kicked off the mayor's 10-year plan to rehabilitate the abandoned buildings.
It's a plan to build or rehabilitate 250,000 units over a 10-year period at a cost of $5 billion. It's something no local government, no state government has ever undertaken.
Describe this apartment. How many rooms is it?
This is a two-bedroom, and with the dining room area and living room.
And how about your rent?
It's $530 a month.
How do you get these apartments? You don't have to know anybody. 150 people, just like Yolanda, sent in letters along with 8,000 other people. 8,000 people, families, applied for 150 apartments. And Yolanda was one of the lucky ones. She didn't have to know anybody.
Well, that's connections. That's what that's about. You know, she just knew the right people and she got into the right place. That's all. It's not about the mayor's not doing this because he's helping a poor Hispanic family. That family wasn't a poor family. That family just happened to have the right connections. And it looked good for him. That's all.
Affordable housing is everyone's problem, whether it's the homeless person who needs a roof over his head or the taxpayer who subsidizes federal and city housing plans. But for the city and the homesteaders, the problem is a legal one.
When we have an alternative use for the building, we will go in generally, sometimes through the courts, sometimes with the police department, sometimes with the city marshals, and forcefully, if necessary, dispossess the people. Not in a violent way, but in a forceful way.
Some say homesteading is right, some say it's wrong. But for the children of the families in these buildings, it isn't a question of right or wrong. It's home.
I'm a mother of two. I hold a full-time job, happily married over 9 years now, and we have a beautiful apartment. We've worked on it. It's been over 2 years that we've been working on our apartment, and it's one of the best apartments I've ever lived in.
Mama, would you shuffle for me? Please.
This was a better answer here for my kids.
I don't shuffle very well.
And I think they'll appreciate it more because they see how hard it is. That, you know, what you want in life, you got to work for it.
Other kids say, why don't you live in a real apartment? I say, because I want my room the way I want it to be. This is my bed. He made this out of wood and stuff. He's gonna take the same carpet right here, that carpet that he cut off. He's gonna put on here, and he's gonna make it so it's very soft and I don't have to wear any socks when I go to bed. They say, I wish my room was this way or that way, and they say, I wish it was too. And I say, well, I have a chance to make it that way, and it's a lot of fun.
We've been living here for a couple years, and my wife's been here longer. She put in the floor in this apartment here. And, well, we have a 4-month-old daughter, and everything is great.
She was born here, right here in the apartment, and she'd like to tell you about that, I guess. We had a midwife, and it was really great. It kind of goes along with the philosophy of, like, not going into that mainstream, but it just made sense to have her at home if, you know, women have been doing this for a long time. And the same thing with building the houses and everything. It just makes sense to make your house the way you want it to be.
Families is a very key point in this whole movement, and they need to be supported and helped a little more because they have to, you know, take care of kids.
People say that we're a very strong family, and I say, well, yes, that is true because we stick together like one person and like a ball. Inside of the ball, we're all people all over together. It's very exciting. You never know what's going to happen next.
I love you, baby.
Thank you.
Did I do good or what? I'm telling you, man, it's happening. It's happening.
Underground and Alphabet City will return. But it could crumble as easily as these buildings here on the Lower East Side if we don't resolve our housing needs. It's hard to be objective when we're talking about people's lives. The city is putting out an admirable effort to give the poor a fair shot at decent housing, while the squatters do what they have to do to survive. In the end, what matters is that we learn to communicate. Somehow we have to start to pull together, or we'll surely break apart. I'm Edward Asner, Underground in Alphabet City.
My biggest hopes and dreams would be to one day win a couple of million in the New York State lottery, buy a home, a building, and have it all fixed up and give it to the homeless so that they can run it, and then find a wife in the Midwest and move out to California and live comfortably there for the rest of my life.
I wish you or whoever you are would gain some intelligence and start realizing what's going on instead of sitting behind your secure locked doors at home and watching your television and guzzling down your beers.
Once again, I got to be careful in what I say because I'm not saying every squatter doesn't care. But I'm saying it's like, who's getting a free ride here and why?
Quote Nietzsche, that which does not destroy you can only make you stronger.
If this house is supposed to belong to the city of New York, then it belongs to me because I pay taxes to the city of New York.
They simply do not want to give these poor people crumbs.
Tucson, Arizona, where homeless men took over City Hall and held it for a week and renamed it Murphyville, in name of a homeless man who died on the streets. In Los Angeles, where homeless people are closing down those Skid Row hotels. And in Boston, where we have a group of homeless people who have taken over some buildings and are holding them down, are saying to everyone that you can come and take us out if you want to, but you better believe that you're going to have to struggle on your hand when you take us out of here. Because it makes no sense for the city to own all this property and to control buildings that are boarded up and have locks on the doors, and we're homeless in the street.
I bring you greetings from Boston, Massachusetts. We bring you encouragement. We bring you motivation. And we bring each other power. We've been taking back the land in Boston. We've been taken back what's ours. We've taken 4 attempts to take over an abandoned building. On that 4th attempt, we succeeded. And the city was astounded. They couldn't believe it.
When we talk about power, as of today, we hold the power today. We got the power in New York City today. And yes, what Chris Sproul told you is absolutely correct. We run the only shelter. We run our own shelter in Philadelphia. The only shelter in the country that's run by homeless people. In our shelter, we live by that slogan, we are homeless, but we are not helpless.
I bring you greetings from Washington, D.C. We have a delegation of 5 people here today, and we're very, very proud to be here. The strength and the power that we see in this room is incredible. We call ourselves in Washington, D.C. the local 15,000 because we have 15,000 homeless men, women, and children in D.C.
Ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, I call this convention to order so we can get on with the business of organizing the union that's going to start to move out front and to say to Koch, no more, to say to Trump Towers, no more. You're going to build housing for us and not for the rich. We want some respect, but they ain't going to give it to us. And I think in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a struggle. It never has, it never will.
That this convention call on the city of New York to initiate an emergency program of rehabilitation of abandoned and vacant but structurally sound housing, which will allocate the jobs thus created to homeless and unemployed residents, as well as a similar allocation of the rehabilitated housing to those most in need. That this convention called for a 1-year moratorium on all evictions.
And whereas the military budget stands in direct opposition to our ability to get jobs, and the money spent on just one MX missile could employ homeless people to renovate condemned and abandoned houses, that would at the same time provide hundreds of homeless people in this city with permanent housing.
The board members of the new union.
Charles Thomas, Atlantic Avenue Men's Shelter. Ruthie Washington, Atlantic Avenue Men's Shelter. Bradford Peters Palace Hotel.
Frank Morales, Squatter, Lower East Side.
Captain Thompson, Homestead on Lower East Side.
Isaac McQueen, Bellevue Shelter.
I'm Cheryl White and I'm from Lexington.
Fleming Beverly.
I'm Muhammad Arif, and many of you know me for the last 35 years from all 5 boroughs. And I have my voter's registration with me, too.
We'll fight up! We'll take no more! We'll fight up! We'll take no more! We'll fight up! We'll take no more! We'll fight up! We'll take no more!
Here to discuss the goals of the Union of the Homeless are Chris Sproul, president of the national organization, Alfredo Gonzalez, acting president of the New York chapter. Chris, the homeless come from a lot of different areas of our society. Some are homeless families, people with jobs. There are also alcoholics and people who have been released from mental institutions. How do you organize people like that?
First of all, we need to dispel that myth about who homeless people are. And I noticed that you start off by saying, they're alcoholics and they're people with drug problems, and that old stereotype about who homeless people are. Studies and recent studies have started to indicate that throughout this country, people who are homeless are people with a history of work, former workers. They're women who flee an abusive situation. They're young people who have been aged out of the child welfare system. In other words, a whole wide range of people who have been contributors to the society are now find themselves homeless or forced out into the streets. And of course, we have a certain percentage of homeless people that are alcoholics, that are mentally disordered, but they constitute a small percentage of the total number of homeless people. And we organize homeless people like you organize anyone else. Homeless people have aspirations and dreams. They want a quality of life. They want a slice of the American dream. They want to be back into a stabilized situation once again.
Alfredo Gonzalez, before the union came to New York last November, you were involved in changing conditions at a specific shelter in the Bronx. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, before the union came, I was organizing up in the Bronx, and we had a committee in the Bronx. And basically what we challenged was the curfew. There's a curfew in city-run shelters. We challenged that curfew, saying, why are we being curfewed when we haven't committed any crimes? Usually a curfew happens under a state of emergency, and we curfew 7 days a week. Curfew, you have to come in by 9. The little victory that we won is that we got to change to 10. If you're not back by 10, you lose your bed. And another little things that we got is another little victory is they used to give 1 milk for breakfast and 1 box of cornflakes. Big victory. Now they give 2 boxes of cornflakes and 2 milks. And this is breakfast, man, for grown men. And another victory that we won is we got cleaner bathrooms, because now they clean on a more regular basis. You have to realize that the shelter I'm talking about is a shelter with 500 men, and there's only enough room for 18 people to take a shower at a time, and 18 commodes, what have you. And there's constant traffic, to the bathroom. People, using it to shave, to shower, take care of their necessities. And it wasn't being cleaned on a regular basis. Now it's more on a half-hour basis.
Chris, I'd like to ask you that the conditions that Alfredo is describing are very local, very specific to the shelters in a particular place. Why is a national union of the homeless necessary? Why isn't it necessary to organize in each individual city and locality?
Well, first of all, problems are no different in New York than they are in Chicago, than they are in New Orleans or Houston, Texas. It's a whole question of jobs for people. It's a question of affordable low-income housing. It's a whole question of an end-to-shelter system. We see this as not only a problem of local, of city, state, and government, we also see this as a national problem. And the only way we're going to be able to respond in any sort of organized way is to build a national organization so we can start to respond to the national government. We need a national housing program.
And I gather you've been able to achieve some successes in other cities. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. The biggest thing that we've just negotiated with the city of Philadelphia is that the city of Philadelphia is turning over to our union 200 units of housing that they own for us to rehab. That we will get the workforce of homeless people together. They will bring in some contractors who will start to teach homeless people how to rehab houses. They have also committed themselves that they will take that money they would normally use to shelter people, and they will put that money into the rehab of these 200 units.
What about in New York, Alfredo Gonzalez? What about this problem of permanent housing for the homeless in New York? Is that something your union is going to be involved with?
Right now, we are working with, a proposal that is being given to the city of New York around the issue of affordable housing. This is being done by the Housing Justice Campaign, and we're interested in working with them. It's the proposal that we've seen here in this city that seems to address, the problem of low-income housing more than any other proposal that we've seen, and we've seen them all.
Chris, just briefly, where else do you expect the Union of the Homeless to go to organize?
Well, the National Executive Board of the Union just recently met this past weekend in Chicago, and that was homeless leaders from 8 different cities in this country: California, Chicago, New Orleans, Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And we agreed that this coming winter that we will continue to organize in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Detroit, San Francisco, Oakland, Tucson, Arizona, Houston, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, that we will continue to organize in this country to build that national movement that's going to talk about changing the priorities of this country.
All right, Chris Sproul, thank you very much. Alfredo Gonzalez, thank you.
Thank you.
And now let's see how 8 homeless people on the Lower East Side have been dealing with their lack of housing. They are living in a cluster of shacks on an empty lot to protest the city's housing policies and the gentrification of their community. To avoid a city eviction order, they simply moved across the street.
We call it Shantytown, and we're very proud of it. As it stands now, it consists of 8 individuals that are living here. My name is Mike. I'm 34. I've seen the Lower East Side change a lot. To be honest with you, I really don't care, what people think. I really don't. I'm standing for something that I believe I have a right to have. I have a right. I was born here, I was raised here, and I'm still living here on the Lower East Side. Ain't nobody's gonna tell me to get out of here.
My name is Stella Torres, and I'm 33, and Michael is my common-law husband. Michael lost his job when we had our last child. We have 5 children. We couldn't afford to pay rent. We couldn't afford to do a lot of things. Pressure brought us into doing things that we weren't supposed to be doing. And we kind of like lost our apartment.
We're moving. We gotta move.
If we don't move when the required time comes, which is coming very, very soon, and we want to beat them to the punchline, We want to be able to say when they come with their papers, "Stuff it! We moved without you." We get 6 months in jail. You can't afford a home anymore. If you got no money, or if you don't have enough money, if you have a lot of kids, or if you don't have too much of an income, or if your husband makes $100 and you make $100, that's $200. How can you pay $400 plus clothing, plus food, plus electricity, plus gas, plus telephone, plus medical? That creates homelessness.
The time's coming. A lot of people in this neighborhood are going to get thrown out of their homes. The government's helping the landlords to throw them out of their homes. The city itself says there's 60,000 people living in the streets, and the churches say there's over 100,000 people. Some say there's 250,000 people living in the streets of New York City. And, the city does diddly squat to try and give people a place to live.
There are Spanish, there are whites, there are Orientals, there are blacks, there are Haitians, there are Dominicans, they're all kinds. And they're living in the street because they don't know how to defend themselves. So right away they go to the city, and the city says, "Yo, man, go to a shelter."
What is the sense of going to a shelter if you got to walk around with your worldly possessions? If you're afraid to go to sleep at night because somebody's going to kill you or mug you or rape you or kill you or something, how can that be an alternative?
You see, that belongs over here. Then I'm going to take the plastic, and after it's nailed in, put it this way. Okay, I got it over here. I got it. I got it. I got
There.
it. I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it.
Quiere hacer más trabajo de la cuenta, you know? Y después se encojona, y a mí me encojona, y me dan ganas de meter en la cosa.
We have to deal with Mother Nature. Sometimes she's nice to us, but then sometimes she just says, man, I gotta rain on you. And it's hard because it's hard for us to cook.
Thank you. You can't sit nowhere. You can't cook. Everything is wet. Wait, Steven, stay there. Michael? Steven needs your help. He's got a broken leg and he's carrying that mattress and he can't climb over. We thought that it was really, really important for people to know that poor people have a right to live. I mean, we have a right to eat. We should have a space of our own. We shouldn't be pushed out of our neighborhood. We shouldn't be considered garbage because we're not, we're people. We have feelings, we think, we hurt, we feel pain. We go through hunger, we get sick. We feel happiness, we feel joy, and we feel everything everybody else does. What makes us any less of a person? Why? Because we don't have money?
You know what I pay a month rent?
Are you poor?
Yes. And I pay $150 a month rent.
All right, rent control. How long you been living there?
About 7 years.
7 years. There you
But
are.
there's places like this. There's many places in there. And then and New York City is putting up places. I see the poorest people live in the best houses. And they're living good on welfare.
Where?
Now, I have a cousin that she's about 70 years old right now, and she live in New York City for 50 years and have never paid over $150 rent, have 6-room apartments.
How long has she been living
So 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
There you go.
You're doing this because you want to do this.
No, we're doing this because we don't believe what the system is offering
Yeah,
us.
but you don't have to. That's the point. You don't have to.
But what's the system offering us?
You do not have to live like this.
That's very easy for you to say. You pay $150 a month.
And you can also get a job.
We all work.
That's right.
You
We
work?
all work.
You work?
We all
We
work.
all work.
Well, if you're working, you don't have to live like this.
Why not?
I wouldn't even let my dog live in a place like this.
Well, thank you,
Well, then
tell
there's
you.
two
Then
words. Bye.
Then I would rather have you leave my property now. Because you insulted me, man, and this is my home. And nobody
But I'm
insults
saying that
my
you don't
home.
have
No,
to
man.
live.
We don't want to talk to you no more. Now,
You don't
just
have to
leave.
live like this.
I said just leave before I sick my dogs on you.
You can't do that.
Hey, well, you know, what are you saying, man? That I'm living like a dog?
No,
I'm a human being surviving, man. We
But
don't
you don't
need,
know, but you
look,
don't
I
have to
don't
do
need people like you coming in here trying to tell me that you wouldn't even let your dog live here. I got more class than half of the motherfuckers that live in the goddamn neighborhood.
Yeah.
So don't run your shit to me because you pay $150 fucking dollars.
Right.
Now please do me a favor and leave this alone.
I'll leave when I get ready.
These are the ignorant people, man, that don't realize that that same guy that came over here and said that we don't have to live like this, sooner or later, he's going to wind up living in a lot like this because he will not be able to afford the rent.
These people over here talk us down throw things out the window.
They
These
just
right here.
They just bought that
These
building.
people
These people
don't
are getting
realize
evicted.
that they're going to get thrown out.
Then where are they going to
gonna
go? They're not living with me.
Here.
Not with us.
Sure aren't going across the street.
You're not shaking me out of here. This belongs to me. To me. My father grew up here. I grew up here. I got my ass kicked over here, and I kicked a lot of ass over here. This belongs to me, not some individual that comes from, you know, NYU, you know, or from, you know, the West Coast and says, well, I feel like living on the Lower East Side because it's popular. That's bullshit, man. Where the fuck are you going to put all of the poor people? Huh?
Joining us now are two gentlemen who will clarify the issues involved in this case. Robert Moncrief is the acting deputy commissioner of the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development, and Randolph Scott McLaughlin is from the Center for Constitutional Rights. Mr. McLaughlin represented and still represents Delia Torres. Randy, how did Mike and Delia come to you, and why did you take this case?
They learned of an involvement that I had as an attorney for a group of squatters on East 7th Street. The shanty town that they presently reside in is 1 block away from that. And they came to me with a 10-day notice to quit the premises that the city had served on them. And that very weekend...
That's an eviction notice for...
Correct.
Labor.
That very weekend, I had seen a program about Mitch Snyder, who was planning to pitch a tent outside of the White House to protest homelessness and make it a national issue. And I literally just thought to myself, what a wonderful idea to do here in New York City to visualize this issue for all New Yorkers. And with that, I decided to take the case when they came to me, and we then filed a civil rights action in State Supreme Court here in Manhattan, in which we said that the residents of Shantytown have a constitutional right to remain where they are, to protest the city's policies or their problems with the policies around homelessness, and they had a state constitutional right to have adequate shelter and housing provided for them. And so far, the city has refused to do either of those two things.
Bob Moncrief, what is the city's position on this?
Well, the city's position has been to go to court to remove the people from that site because we consider them squatters. That we don't see that they have a constitutional right to protest on the city's land in this case, and a judge has also seen it that way. So our position is that we are moving forward to evict the tenants or the squatters from that site.
So you really do want to remove them now that you've won the first round?
Yes, we do.
And
although the case is under appeal, so it goes on.
So you will appeal?
Oh, we have. We will. No question about that. We feel that the judge below made some serious errors in the way he handled the matter, and in some ways did not address the state constitutional claim that the city has to provide shelter, adequate shelter for these individuals. They will tell you that the shelter provided by the city is woefully inadequate. It's rodent-infested. People are not being housed in shelters. Homeless individuals are being shipped to New Jersey and warehoused there. Can't come back to New York because they don't have the money to come back to New York.
Right. Now, in the first lot, before they moved, they were kicked off essentially so that public housing development could be built there. Were they offered a chance to be residents of that development?
I don't believe that they were. As you know, there's a waiting list to get into public housing, which is probably over 100,000 families, so that we didn't think that it was appropriate for them to set priorities for themselves and for the city and to rent them space in that new construction project. There are many, many families that have been on the waiting list for over 10 years to get into public housing, and we didn't feel that they should go to the head of the list, as it were.
Realistically, if you evict these people or kick them off the lot that they're on now, where do you expect them to go?
Well, as Randy said before, they could go to city shelters. No one has to stay on the street, not a single individual, if they want to stay in a shelter. And we have hotels, we have congregate shelters where people can have a roof over their heads until permanent housing is built. Clearly, we would prefer that there would be enough permanent housing to place people in a private, suitable apartment right away, but that isn't the reality. The reality is that we have many people living in temporary quarters, and until we can build enough permanent housing, they will remain in those quarters.
What's the matter with the alternative?
You have to ask yourself the question, why is it that as we walk through the streets of New York, people are sleeping in sidewalks by the thousands, and the shelter system is available, and the welfare hotels are available? Why do people refuse to go there? Why does the mayor have to literally arrest people and have the police cart them away when the temperature drops below a certain point? Because they don't want to go into those places, because they're dehumanizing, they're dangerous, people are beaten up, brutalized, raped, mugged, and murdered.
We have constructed almost 9,000 apartments since 1984 for homeless people. We still have a crisis with us. The hotels still have 4,600 families in them.
You're not even keeping up with the abandonment rate.
We're hardly keeping up with the number of families coming into the hotels. We're now producing 3,600 apartments a year for the homeless, and we're going to be producing 4,000 next year. We hope that this will help out. In the meantime, we have a plan to build shelters for homeless people, temporary shelters, in each of the 5 boroughs of the city, 4 shelters per borough.
Randy, you've been around this block quite a bit. Are you convinced that at this point the city is paying attention to the problem in a serious way finally? That certain changes are really being made?
I think that the city still is refusing to offer permanent housing to the homeless. We're talking about 3,000 units, and the number of people who are being made homeless every day by the gentrification policies of this city are way above those numbers. So yes, they are doing something. The question is, are they doing enough? You only have to walk on the street of New York and see folks in the streets to know they're not doing enough.
Thank you very much, Randy McLaughlin and Bob Moncrief. It's estimated that over 3,000 people around the city are squatters. In a documentary called Home, we'll see a group of squatters affiliated with the community organization known as Acorn. In the spring of 1985, they moved into vacant houses in the East New York section of Brooklyn.
You know something, traveling through the streets of East New York, I used to look at all these abandoned buildings, and I used to always say to myself, if I could get me one of those buildings, you know, from the city, or just move in one, I would fix it up and I would live in that building. I used to always say, well, all these houses are empty and nobody in them. You know? I said, if I could just move into one and just fix it up and just stay there, I would do it. Because there's so many buildings. And they're just sitting here, you know. And I figured it would help the city, it help to get the streets cleaned up, and our neighborhood would look better. It's good for the community, and it's good for the person that has the courage to do it.
As New York City continues to grow and flourish daily, many surrounding areas are slowly fading away. East New York...
Not just that you're free, but that just said, I believe you've all taken a reasonable approach because the problem is so great, the situation is so desperate, that you have no other choice except try to repair the building to make it livable.
has sought many solutions to meet the housing shortage. These programs entail renovation of existing property as well as plans for new construction.
The city has been working for a number of years to come up with a plan for housing in East New York. First of all, I'd like to talk about our auction program. Everybody says, well, when we sell buildings at auction, there's no controlling the price and how do poor people get. But the fact remains that of the 78 buildings that have been sold at auction in East New York, 23 were sold for $5,000 or less. This means that the person only had to have $1,250 and his monthly payments on the mortgage would be about $30 a month. Now, my response is anybody who cannot afford that cannot afford to rehabilitate a vacant building.
In the first place, at those auctions, I've seen shells of houses go for $50,000, $60,000, and most of the people who obtain those houses there are speculators. The people in this community cannot afford to go as high as the speculators can for those houses.
The other program that we used in this area begun about a year ago was a lottery which made about 30 vacant buildings available for only $250. And in addition to this, the city put in up to $30,000 a building of money to help buy down the interest rates.
This happened to be one of the houses that was in the lottery and was drawn by the member. And the city appropriated for these 33 houses $1 million to rehab these buildings with. Since the lottery has been won, the city has not given over the money to rehab this building. The man who won this building in the lottery has been fighting with the city since August a year ago. And so far, they have not gotten anywhere with the city with putting the money toward rehabbing this building.
All the buildings the city had sold to the lottery as part of its pilot homesteading program still remain abandoned. Guillermo Colon participated in both the lottery and the auction but did not obtain a house, so for now he has decided to become a squatter.
And I still willing to have a home for my family. Over this way. And it's not easy when you try to buy a house and everything is stuck. And you go over here and you go to HPD and you go to the auction and they can even sell it to you because the auction most of the time is the real estate. They take in the house because we're willing to buy a house for $4,000 like they say, and we can pay $40 a month to have the house. But never forget it. You go over there and the house going over $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Now what happened with the money you need to rebuild the house inside? And that's my problem. And every problem here in East New York and all over here that we suffer, we struggle, and we got no other choice. We have to squat it. We're willing to go to jail because this is illegal, but we still standing. Because every dreaming for American people is to fight for our country, for our freedom, and to have a home.
While Mr. Colon, a 49-year-old upholsterer, repairs the first floor of his building, his family lives comfortably on the renovated second floor. He has done most of the work himself and has received no financial support from the city.
This house was abandoned for more than 19 years, and people was living, drug addict, and all these people, all chunky people was living in here. To me, this house is like something special that I never had before, a home to my family. It's nice when you have to work and do something for your own, for your family. You feel proud to do it, and you got some kind of energy that you don't care how long or how many hours you have to work for something that you like it, I mean, and this is love. When something is love, you work, and you feel proud to do what you do. See, I feel good. I feel happy, and I say thanks to God.
The city has had several construction programs aimed at revitalizing East New York and its surrounding neighborhoods.
In fact, we consider what we're doing now Phase 2. In Phase 1, we had developed some housing authority projects as well as some Section 8 housing when that program was in existence. For Phase 2, what we're trying to do is take advantage of some of the unique housing characteristics of the East New York area. East New York does afford us an opportunity to do new construction because there is a large amount of vacant lots and vacant land in the area.
The city has various programs of dealing with the housing problem, but these houses range from $49,000 to just $60,000 per unit, and you have to be a person that earning $20,000 and up per year in order to own one of these buildings. Meanwhile, we have a large percentage of our people that live in this community does not earn this kind of money. The city is not making any provision for these people to have buildings to live in.
The city's largest effort is a collaboration with private investors and the organization of East Brooklyn churches. The Nehemiah plan will be expanded to encompass East New York, but it is economically out of reach for most people in the community and threatens to displace many people who have lived there for years.
We're hoping to do approximately 1,550 units of single-family housing with the Nehemiah project. Unique thing about Nehemiah is that it's a real partnership between the city government, the state government, and the community East Brooklyn churches who have all putting in some money and making a program work and produce a large amount of housing.
You have to take me and take the house along with me. You understand that? My belly, the clock is ticking too fast. I haven't got long to be here. And don't uproot me now, because where am I going? Where am I going? Huh? If justice is blind, then is this the justice you're giving me? After I fought so hard over there?
Now they're talking about building a one-family house out of inferior material, putting my family in there, 2 families in a 1-family house. The Nehemiah plan started off by saying we want to build on empty lots. Now they went from building on empty lots to now acquiring people's property, acquiring this man's furniture store, acquiring our grocery store. Where will we have the shop? Where will we go? Where will my father go? He's finished paying for his house. Now they want him to pay for another mortgage. Now we have reverends coming dressed up in cloth and giving us prayer while they're taking our homes and telling us we have to go. We have people that come here that squat in this community. That's how much they love the community and want it to be built up in the community.
I admire the squatters. I really admire them because they give them, say, hey, I want a home. I'm willing to get in here and I'm willing to work. And they get in there and they really do a good job. Why knock these buildings down? You'd never get another building like it.
Homesteading, an opportunity to work for yourself. That's right. That's what they're asking for. And then if they listen to that, then you'll be able to come up with something that's fine.
The squatters are people that have lived in these, that you see these houses now that they couldn't afford. They could not get any help from the city.
Because I'll tell you, the poor will be ready to take these houses over, and all you do is give them a little help, and they will fix these houses to live in.
Yeah, because they're doing it on their own
They
now.
want to do this.
Homesteading is a legal program in which we have proposed to the city about giving the homes to the poor people that they might rehab the buildings.
Acorn is trying to force the city to include 1 to 4 family houses in its homesteading program.
The area does have some smaller multiple dwellings, which historically are among the hardest for us to rehabilitate. We agree that all pressure should be put on us to move the buildings back into use as quickly as possible. It doesn't matter that we may have a program for this building that, as slow as we are, it may have taken 2 years to get to fruition, and now somebody's ready to go in. A squatter says, I don't care that you've waited 2 years. I don't want to wait. I am taking this building.
The squatters are not taking any buildings from anyone. Number one, if those buildings had been slated, or if the city had planned to use those buildings for families who were already homeless, they would have had some plans already for it. These buildings are here. They are capable of being rehabilitated, where families who normally cannot afford to go out and purchase a home, but do have the ability to rehab, will be able to get home that way.
Well, at first I didn't like the idea of breaking into this abandoned house, but I have changed my mind after I started thinking about the future of my kids. I will probably pass away soon, so I would like to leave a safe home for my children. I think that this is the only way to do it because so far we haven't got any help from the city.
We're not asking the city to give us the house free. We just want them to give us the house at a cost that we can afford.
We're fixing this house with the help of our neighbors and the members of Acorn, each one giving us material for what we need. And in the same way, if we have something they might use, we will share it with them because we're all united within the group to help each other.
I have 2 brothers, they're electricians, and I have an uncle that's a foreman in a lumber yard, so anything we need for the house, we get it cheaper. You know, we help each other that way.
Baylin Roman and her daughter Sandra were repairing a building, but as winter approached, they were forced to stop work due to the lack of heat and electricity. They plan to start again in the spring.
The reason why we're doing this is because we need a place to live. Where we are now, we can't afford the rent, and the increases the landlord imposes on us every time he has to fix something. And we're very poor people, living on welfare, with no other means to support us, so we thought it was better to rehab these buildings. After seeing that they are abandoned with only rats living in them and that the only people that use them are criminals to do their misdeeds. I think it will look better if we repair these buildings to make them livable for us.
Jesus Hernandez feels that the city's plans for his neighborhood are inadequate for people who, like him, have large families. He believes that Acorn's idea of rehabilitating existing houses and turning them into homes may be a solution.
And what they're doing is tearing down 4 and 6 family buildings and replacing them with prefab one-family houses. This might be okay for them, but my point is, the people that are being dislocated, where are they supposed to go? Where can they move? Like it's happening here right now. We have no place to go, especially people like me with large families. They don't want us in Queens. They don't want us in Long Island. Even here, they don't want me. I am being thrown out of my house. So, the only choice left for us is to rehab these buildings. My family is doing everything they can to fix the house so that we can move in. My wife is helping me, and our sons are giving us some money and doing a lot of work. We start working very early in the morning and work until dark when we can't see no more. They are helping me very, very much. I am aware that what I am doing is illegal, but I've been forced to do it. My situation is very difficult. I'm being evicted because the landlord wants the house for someone else. But when I go to a real estate agent looking for a house, not only is the rent too expensive, but when the question comes, how many people will live in the house, they don't want to rent it to me, even if I had the money. And that's why I am taking this house illegally from the city.
Yes, squatting is illegal. So what Acorn has done, rather than to try to tell these people that it is, you cannot live here, is to form these people into a group that would impress to the city that here are people who need a place to live, and hopefully that the city would do something about it.
Acorn is the people in the community, people who are fighting for the betterment of their community and for a voice.
I was told one day about Acorn. I became interested and started going to their meetings and learning about their programs of getting houses. I would have never tried to take this house without their support. Because when there is a group of people united supporting you, it is much better than doing it by yourself. And not only that, but I don't know. It would have never crossed my mind to understand that I could do this. And that's how I got to be here, in my home. Because now, this is my home.
In the winter of 1985, the city relented and proposed to expand its homesteading program to include 1 to 4 family houses. The city agreed to hand over 180 units, or approximately 60 houses, including all the houses the Acorn squatters had repaired. The city will also provide for $2 million in low-interest loans for the homesteaders. Acorn, along with the assistance of other community groups and organizations, will establish a cooperative to oversee the homesteading project and to distribute the units to eligible homesteaders. This cooperative will also provide for additional loans as well as materials for rehabilitation. The city is proceeding cautiously in Brooklyn because it is unsure of the repercussions of its homesteading program as squatting continues to increase in other depressed neighborhoods. But one thing is certain. The squatters of East New York will continue to rebuild their homes and their community.
The people you've just seen are still living in those houses. They are currently negotiating a formal agreement with the city which will allow them to remain in what are now their homes. In a city where 76% of all renters earn under $25,000, and where up to 100,000 units of vacant city-owned housing exist, the question is, why isn't this resource being used? Joining us to talk about solutions to the housing crisis for low-income residents are Avril Walters, a homesteader from East New York who works with Acorn, Harry DiRienzo of the Consumer Farmer Foundation, and a long...
Greed capital of the world. I mean, just say Wall Street is here. I don't have to say any more.
So it is anything but a free ride. It's much more than just paying a rent every month.
We put our heart and soul and sweat into this place.
And once we make something nice out of it, then they want to like come and take it. Take it. You got a fight on your hands now.
Up till the end of October, there were people squatting in the upper units of the building, the three top floors, and the city was trying to evict us for almost 3 years. We were fighting them and finally worked out a compromise.
Avtalet gick ut på att husockupanterna flyttade ut frivilligt mot att de fick fortsätta använda huset som kulturcentrum.
This is on the second floor, and this will eventually be like art space for people who are working on like no real projects for the gallery below.
My mom says I came out of the womb carrying a 45.
Att ABC No Rio får finnas kvar är en seger över staden. Huset har fungerat som en samlingspunkt för kulturkretsarna på Manhattans Lower East Side sedan början av 80-talet. Här träffas också husockupanter och politiska föreningar som Food Not Bombs, som lagar och delar ut mat till kvarterets hemlösa.
You don't got those weird pickles, do you?
No.
Yeah, we don't put it.
The Lower East Side has always been a very low-income district. Historically, this was a place where immigrants would start out, as well as students, musicians, artists. This was a neighborhood where you can afford to live. And this is the first time in history, these last 10 years, that the Lower East Side has become like a high-income district. These are posters that I've done on subjects having to do with the neighborhood. The issues down here are usually related to housing or real estate, and property is underneath it all. It's really the same old story of American history, of new people moving in and new people with money moving in, pushing the other people out, the indigenous people.
Många ger upp och flyttar från Manhattan till områden med lägre hyror. Andra stannar kvar, lever utanför samhällets lagar och ockuperar en lägenhet i ett övergivet hus. För 10 år sedan fanns det gott om ockuperade hus här. Idag finns bara 13 kvar.
I've been here for about 7 years, and I've been squatting for about 17 in this neighborhood, and I recycle and pray. I try to take a pretty spiritual and wholesome look on how to survive with the least dependence on the system as we know it today. So welcome to Rap Studio, Recycle and Pray. This is where I live and work. This is my kitchen and living area, my info shop section. You need a new wall. You get the bricks and you put a new wall in there. You want the stove in that corner. You get a stove and you put it in that corner. Within boundaries of still knowing that we have to have a whole building to function together, we have a lot of freedom in creating our environment and our apartments where we live the way we like to. We pay with our time and direct action far more than anyone would by doing it on the system way. I was involved in a 13th Street resistance where 30 of us were arrested, and we were hit by 2,000 cops, a tank, and they evicted 200 people, closed down 5 buildings on East 13th Street, not far from here.
En annan del av ockupantrörelsen kämpar för kvartersträdgårdarna. De skapades som allmännyttor av de boende på övergivna hustomter. Sopor och bråte byttes ut mot växter och väggmålningar. Men staden ser bara till värdet i tomtmarken de vill riva och bygga nytt.
My baby love me, take me through the day.
It should be a basic right that everyone recognizes now, that human beings have a right to a little dab of nature. These people here, they don't have the resources to go to the Botanic Garden and pay $8, spend an hour on the train. Why shouldn't their children have a place to play? The city left it as a vacant lot for 20 years, which we find untenable. How dare they make us live next to this junk? And then once we make something nice out of it, then they want to like come and take it. Take it. You got a fight on your hands now.
The developers have a history of coming in and saying we're going to build something, you know, now, and maybe under the pretense that the housing is affordable. In this case right now, winter's coming on and it might be hard to start any construction, but, you know, diesel engines will still start in the winter and they could still have bulldozers. The point is that the garden, or what was the garden, would just sit and it wouldn't be anything. It wouldn't be anything for anybody except just an eyesore.
We're feeling good now because our enemy is so afraid. Yeah. Come on, bring something down for the barricade.
The city abandoned this neighborhood, they abandoned this building, they left it to burn, they left it to rot and get infested with rats and whatever else and just pile up with garbage. And so the people that have come into these buildings have a real commitment to the community. And I like and want to be a part of that. Welcome to my home. I have to close this door. This is just our shed. And this is our home. And we just moved in here a couple weeks ago after working for 2.5 years. And this is a great example of the kind of work that people do here. We came home one day from a family outing and this bathtub was on the sidewalk. And I said, this is it, this is the tub we want. We recycle things and we use things that we find and create something really wonderful and unique.
Do you think the city will let you stay here?
Well, that remains to be seen. I have no indication that they would, due to the way that they've treated other such situations, not obeying court rulings and just going right ahead and doing whatever they want to do. But it is our building, and by the law of adverse possession, we have occupied it and maintained it and taken care of it. It is ours.
That's why I love you.
En efter en rivs de ockuperade byggnaderna för att ge plats åt nya hus med höga hyror. En positiv förändring tycker många, men för människorna här, som vare sig vill eller kan betala upp till 15 000 kronor i månadshyra för en etta, innebär det början till slutet på ett sätt att leva. Men än har de inte gett upp kampen.
Hanging out on Avenue A any time of the night or day. That's why I love New York. Anyone want to add a verse?